What if that heartbreak wasn't the end, but the beginning of something greater? What if that person who left was never meant to stay broken from you forever? You see, when love is sincere and Allah is in the middle, even separation carries meaning. Sometimes it's not rejection, it's redirection. Sometimes the break is not to destroy you, but to prepare you. So listen closely. If you're holding someone in your heart, if you still make dua with their name, there are signs you must look for. Because when Allah is planning to restore that bond, He doesn't just bring them back. He prepares you to receive them the right way. Sign 1. The pain doesn't feel like despair. It feels like a quiet reminder. There's a kind of pain that breaks you, and there's a kind that humbles you. If you still remember that person and it doesn't destroy you, but brings a quiet stillness to your heart, that's not just nostalgia. That's your soul recognizing something that hasn't fully ended. Allah doesn't allow a soul-deep bond to echo without reason. You feel peace even when you're alone. And that peace, it's not from them. It's from Allah reminding you that some love isn't meant to vanish, only to return when the time is right. Sign 2. You're being pulled closer to Allah, not further. After the breakup, did you turn to the dunya or did you turn to Allah? Because when Allah plans to restore someone to you, He first restores you to Him. You start praying more. You cry during your sajda. You whisper that person's name not with obsession, but with surrender. This love is no longer an idol in your life. It becomes part of your faith. And when love begins to purify you, not distract you, it may be a sign that Allah is preparing both hearts for something better than before. Sign 3. You're no longer holding on to the past, but preparing for the future. At first, after the separation, your heart keeps reaching backward. You replay old conversations. You scroll through old photos. You remember what was said, what wasn't said, what could have changed. You wonder, why did it have to end like that? But something shifts. You begin to realize that living in the past is not healing, it's delaying what Allah is trying to teach you. So you stop asking, why did they leave? And you start asking, what can I fix inside me now? Instead of longing to go back, you feel the urge to grow forward. You start focusing on your faith again. You begin praying not just for them, but for yourself. You no longer say, Ya Allah, bring them back. You now say, Ya Allah, make me someone worth bringing them back to. That shift is powerful. That shift is sacred. It means your heart is no longer begging for yesterday, it's being prepared for a future that's better than the past. You stop blaming them for what went wrong. You stop blaming yourself. Because now you see it. It wasn't just a breakup, it was a mirror. A mirror Allah placed in front of you, so you could see your wounds, your fears, your unhealthy patterns, your dependence on someone who was never meant to complete you, only to awaken you. And when you finally start working on yourself quietly, when you no longer post for attention or reach out hoping they'll reply, when you sit in solitude and feel stronger each day, when you heal not out of pride but out of purpose, that's when your heart is no longer stuck in what was. You're no longer dressing your wounds to be seen by them. You're cleansing your soul to be seen by Allah. And in that process, something beautiful happens. You're no longer asking for them to come back the way they were. You're praying that if Allah does bring you back together, you both return as new versions of yourselves. Wiser, more God-conscious, more respectful, more whole. Because this time, it's not about romance. It's about responsibility. It's about preserving a gift that was once broken because neither of you were ready. So if you're noticing this change inside you, where you no longer live in the pain, but rise from it. Where your love becomes preparation instead of obsession, then it may be one of the clearest signs that Allah isn't keeping you apart forever. He's just making sure that if He returns this person to you, you will finally be able to love them without losing yourself again. Because Allah doesn't restore something sacred until both hearts are ready to honor it. Sign 4. You feel their presence in your doers, not just in your mind. It's one thing to remember someone. It's another to carry them in your heart during your most sacred moments, when the world is quiet and it's just you and Allah. You're not daydreaming about them while scrolling through your phone. You're not chasing their attention. You're not fantasizing out of loneliness. No, it's different now. Their name doesn't show up in your thoughts because you're obsessed. It shows up in your sujood, in your most vulnerable, tearful moments. When your forehead touches the ground, when your heart is exposed, and you speak to Allah with no one listening but Him. You find yourself whispering their name between du'as, almost without realizing it. Not begging, not demanding, but surrendering. Ya Allah, I don't know what this is anymore. I don't know what I feel. But if there is any goodness in this love, if this bond is written for me, then return it in a way that brings me closer to you. That's not obsession. That's spiritual clarity. Because when Allah allows someone's name to remain in your dua, again and again without pain, it could mean that your soul sees something your eyes cannot. You're not praying for a person out of emotional weakness. You're doing it out of sincerity, because your love has evolved. You no longer say, bring them back so I can be happy. You now say, bring them back if we will worship you better together than we did apart. That's growth. That's healing. That's what happens when Allah places a love into your life that isn't just emotional, it's spiritual. You don't want them because they made you feel butterflies. You want them because they once made you feel peace. Because when they stood beside you in prayer, you felt something you didn't feel anywhere else. A sense of stillness, a sense of barakatuh. And even if it ended, even if time has passed, that peace still visits your heart when you remember them in dua. You don't force it. It just happens. Like a name that gently floats up in the night air when you're asking Allah for what you don't even fully understand. And it doesn't hurt. Not the way it used to. Because now, you've handed it over. You've let go of control. You've stopped trying to write the story. You've accepted that Allah knows what you cannot say. And if their name still comes to you during worship, not as a distraction, but as a request for goodness. If it brings peace, not pain. If you feel no resentment, only calm surrender. Then maybe it's not just a memory. Maybe it's not just a leftover emotion. Maybe it's a bond that Allah hasn't erased, only paused. And maybe, just maybe, He is still listening to that dua. Because not every love you pray for is meant to fade. Some are meant to return. When both hearts are finally ready to protect what they once prayed for, and if it truly lives in your dua, not in your ego, not in your impatience, but in your sincerity, then trust this: Allah never forgets what the heart asks for in sujood. Sign 5. You see signs that aren't forced. They just appear. You're not chasing. You're not constantly checking their profile. You're not sitting around looking for clues. In fact, you're doing your best to move on. You've surrendered the story. You've told yourself, if it's written, it will return. If not, Allah will replace it with better. But then something happens. You hear their name. Not in your imagination, but from someone else, completely unrelated. You come across a verse, a quote, a lecture, and it speaks directly to your heart. A dream comes. And in that dream, they don't appear as a fantasy. They appear with calm, with light, with stillness. It shakes you. but not in a fearful way. In a familiar way, almost like your soul saying, "See, I haven't forgotten either." You weren't looking for signs. You weren't clinging to false hope. But the signs keep coming, in quiet, unexplainable ways. That's the thing about divine timing. When Allah is writing something in your destiny, He will remind you without overwhelming you. The reminders are subtle. They don't bring anxiety, they bring curiosity. They don't make you spiral, they bring you back to dua. You see their name written somewhere random. A car plate, a book, a message on someone's shirt. And you smile not because you think it's magic, but because your heart remembers without breaking. These signs don't scream. They whisper, like Allah saying, "Stay patient, stay steady. I haven't forgotten either." You might sit in a masjid and hear the imam say a word or phrase they used to say. You might see someone who reminds you of them in manner or expression, and your chest tightens not with pain, but with a strange softness. And when that happens, you don't rush to conclusions. You don't assume it means a reunion is happening tomorrow. You just pause and say, "Ya Allah, if this is from you, guide me. If it's from my nafs, protect me." That's the difference. You're not trying to create meaning where there is none. You're not manipulating life to justify your emotions. You're simply observing. And sometimes that's all you need to do. Because when Allah sends a sign, it doesn't come to confuse you. It comes to prepare you. It comes to align you. And most importantly, it comes when your heart is focused more on Allah than on people. Because the clearest signs come when your soul is the calmest. So, if you're seeing these little nudges, not forced, not imagined, but gently placed in your path, don't rush to act. Don't panic. Don't fantasize. Just return to Allah. Ask Him, "If this is good for my deen, my heart, and my akhirah, then open the doors with your mercy. But if it's not, then close them with gentleness and give me peace." Because real signs don't beg for your attention. They don't bring chaos. They bring clarity when your heart is finally able to receive it. And maybe what you keep calling a coincidence is actually Allah answering your unspoken dua in the quietest, most divine way. Sign 6. You no longer blame them. You understand why it had to happen. At first, you couldn't stop asking, why did they leave? Why did it fall apart when I gave it everything? Why would Allah allow this kind of love only to take it away? You felt betrayed. Maybe not by the person, but by the process. You thought they were the one. You believed the connection was real, and maybe it was. But the outcome still crushed you. And for a while, you blamed them. For not choosing you. For being distant. For leaving when all you wanted was to stay. You also blamed yourself. For not being good enough. For saying too much. For saying too little. For not knowing how to love the right way. But time and reflection begin to soften everything. You stop playing that painful movie in your mind. You stop trying to rewrite the ending. And slowly, the blame fades. And in its place, something else begins to grow. Wisdom. You begin to see it from a higher place. Not as a victim, not as a failure, but as someone who is being reshaped by the most merciful. You realize they didn't abandon you. They weren't trying to hurt you. They were simply not ready, and neither were you. Because real love requires more than emotions. It requires responsibility. It requires maturity. And most of all, it requires spiritual alignment. You see now that Allah wasn't punishing you. He was protecting you. Protecting you from forcing a bond that wasn't yet stable. From building a future on a foundation of unhealed wounds and blind expectations. You realize that your dua, "Ya Allah, grant me what's best for me," wasn't ignored. It was answered, but not in the way you expected. Because sometimes the most painful answer is the most necessary one. You look back now and you see how lost you were, how desperate you were for love, but not ready to carry its weight. You see how they were still carrying their own baggage, and how you tried to carry it for them at the cost of your peace. And now, instead of holding anger, you hold understanding. You don't hate them. You don't resent them. In fact, you begin to thank Allah for the separation, not because the love wasn't real, but because it wasn't complete. Because the truth is, you both had growing to do. You needed to learn how to love Allah more than you loved the idea of them. You needed to learn how to stand alone without falling apart. You needed to learn that peace doesn't come from being loved by someone else. It comes from loving yourself for the sake of Allah. And they needed to learn that love is not just words. It's actions, it's commitment, it's presence, it's being ready to honor what they asked for. And now you don't blame anyone anymore. Because when Allah pulls two people apart, it's never random. It's never cruel. It's never without purpose. It's His way of clearing space, so that when love returns, it's cleaner, stronger, purer. And maybe, when you both meet again, if it's written, you won't be meeting the same versions of yourselves. You'll be meeting the people you were always meant to become. So if you've reached that point where you no longer say, "Why did they do this to me?" but instead say, "What was Allah trying to teach me?" then know this. That's not just healing. That's transformation. That's a heart that's no longer stuck in the past, but ready to receive what's been divinely delayed. And if the day ever comes when they return, you won't love them out of need. You'll love them out of clarity. Not to fix the past, but to build something beautiful with Allah at the center this time. Sign 7. You're not waiting. You're trusting. There was a time when all you could do was wait. You checked your phone hoping for a message. You stared at old photos, hoping they'd feel something too. You kept looking for signs, patterns, meanings, anything that could tell you if they still thought of you. You waited for closure or a reunion. You waited for them to miss you. You waited for life to return to the way it was. But nothing came. And in that silence, your heart broke 1,000 times. You kept praying, but deep down, you were still holding your breath. As if Allah would only answer if you showed enough desperation. You thought waiting was faith. You thought still hoping meant you were loyal. But it was never about how long you could wait. It was about who you were becoming while you waited. And that's when the transformation began. You stopped obsessing. You stopped refreshing messages that never came. You stopped asking Allah to hurry, and instead, you started saying, "Ya Allah, if it's meant for me, I trust you to return it in the best way. But if it's not, I trust you to remove it with mercy." You stopped bargaining with time. You stopped counting the days since they left. You stopped living in the shadows of what could have been. You let go not because you stopped caring, but because you finally understood that Allah doesn't work on human timelines. You realized something deeper. When Allah takes something away, it's not always a punishment. It could be protection. It could be preparation. It could be divine realignment for you and for them. And so now, you're no longer waiting. You're trusting. There's a huge difference between the two. Waiting comes with restlessness. Trusting comes with peace. Waiting is rooted in fear. What if it never happens? Trusting is rooted in faith. If it's written, it can't miss me. You now wake up each day not chasing love, but living in love, the kind that starts between you and Allah. You've shifted your focus. You're rebuilding your routines, strengthening your connection with the Quran, showing up in your prayers, Not just with your body, but with your heart. You've stopped romanticizing the past. You've stopped waiting for someone else to save you. Because now, you've discovered something powerful. The greatest form of love is surrender. You love, but you no longer cling. You remember, but you no longer ache. You pray for them, but you don't idolize them. And that, right there, is spiritual growth. You're not checking for their return every night. You're not asking every dream to give you answers. You're not chasing clarity from people. You're seeking it from Allah. And the most beautiful part? You're at peace, even if they never come back. Because your happiness is no longer tied to their presence. It's tied to your Creator. You've replaced, "I need them to feel okay," with, "Ya Allah, I trust you more than my own desires." That is not weakness. That is real strength. That is what prepares a person to receive divine restoration. When Allah sees that you're no longer chasing the person but chasing His pleasure, that's when He opens doors in the most unexpected, most beautiful ways. And if the one you love is truly written for you, Allah will not just bring them back. He will bring them back better. He will bring them back cleaned by distance, matured by solitude, softened by His mercy. But if they are not written for you, Allah will not leave you empty. He will send something or someone that will fill you in ways you never thought possible. Someone who will come, not to complete you, but to walk with you, whole, healed, and in His name. So if today your heart still remembers them, but your soul is calm, your prayers are strong, and your trust in Allah is unwavering, then know this: you've moved from attachment to tawakkul, trust. And that's a sign not of waiting, but of preparation. Allah does not bless those who are just holding on. He blesses those who let go and still believe. Because sometimes letting go of a person is how you finally hold on to Allah. And through Him, you either find your way back to that person healed and ready, or you find someone you never expected, but who was written for your soul all along. So no, you're not waiting. You're trusting. And that changes everything. So now you've seen the signs. Not the ones written in the sky, but the ones written softly into your heart. You felt the kind of pain that doesn't scream, but whispers through quiet nights and silent prayers. You've cried in sujood, not because you were weak, but because your soul still believed in something your mind couldn't explain. You thought it was over. You thought they walked away, and that meant the story had ended. But Allah, He doesn't write stories the way people do. People give up when it's hard. People let go when emotions fade. But Allah pauses when hearts aren't ready. And if something is meant for you, He doesn't cancel it. He simply rearranges the timing. You started with confusion, but you stayed with patience. You were shattered, but you turned the pieces into worship. And now you've changed. You no longer chase them. You no longer need them to return so you can feel worthy again. Because your worth, it no longer comes from their attention. It comes from your connection to Allah. And that's what makes your heart ready. You saw the signs. You stopped feeling desperate and started feeling peace. You began praying for their goodness, even if it didn't include you. You stopped asking for yesterday to return and started becoming someone who could carry a better tomorrow. You no longer say, "Ya Allah, bring them back no matter what." You now say, "Ya Allah, if it's good for my deen, my heart, and my akhirah, then bring it back with barakah. If not, remove it with mercy and give me something better in your eyes." That's not just growth. That's surrender. That's when you become someone who can carry love without being crushed by it. And maybe, just maybe, that's when Allah begins restoring what He once separated, not to bring back the old, but to bring back something new. Two hearts, not rushing in pain, but returning in peace. You don't need to force anything anymore, because what is written for you will never require begging. Only preparation, only trust, only faith. So if you're feeling all these signs, if your love has turned into a silent prayer, if your patience has become a pathway to Allah, then maybe, just maybe, this isn't the end of the story. Maybe it was never a goodbye. Maybe it was a divine delay, so that Allah could prepare you both, not to repeat the past, but to protect what's sacred, with Him at the center this time. And if that person does return one day, you'll greet them not with desperation, but with grace, because you didn't just wait, you trusted. And if they don't return, you'll still smile, because you know Allah never lets love rooted in sincerity go to waste. He either returns it or replaces it with something that reminds you why you had to let go in the first place. So, breathe, trust, and keep walking with your eyes on Him, because the best love stories are the ones written by the one who sees the pages you can't. And when it arrives, you'll know. This time, it wasn't just love, it was a mercy.